Hi, Lucas.
How's it going?
How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. You?
I'm good. I've just been doing some research and it is so complicated, isn't it, fungus? It is incredibly
Is it?
complicated.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for joining the podcast. I'm going to kick off straight away with cordyceps. I know that's something that is topical at the moment. Um,
Mm.
so cordyceps, that's a type of fungus that is it predominantly parasitic in its nature? How does it work?
Yeah, it can only really live on on insects. So it's like it's a parasite of insects. It'll infect them when they're adult, and then when so particularly moths. The classic one is a Chinese one that lives on moth caterpillars underground. Then when they burrow underground to turn into pupae, the fungus basically then consumes all of the body of the insect and sends up a little spike into the above the ground to release its spores and infect the next generation. Um, but like a lot of fungi, they kind of have like multiple parts of the life cycle as well. So in some species, they'll close relatives like live as endophytes inside grasses. So the idea is that possibly that's how they kind of evolved to feed on the insects. So the insects were eating the grass.
Yeah.
They kind of got into the body of the insect that way, and eventually they kind of adapted to the life of a sort of parasite feeding on insects instead.
Am I right in saying cordyceps? It is there's like different varieties. We're talking like hundreds of different types of cordyceps, and they all kind of have a slightly different. I don't know how you describe it, parasitic nature to them. Um, I know there's a lot of information about zombie ants and how they get
Mm.
infected. Could you explain a little bit about how the fungus works in turning these ants into zombies?
Yeah, so one of the things that sort of fascinated people a lot is how the fungi affect the different organisms' behavior. So find that with a whole bunch of different parasites as well, but like particularly for the fungi that affect the ants, what they do is that they make the ants try to sort of go towards the light and climb as high as possible, so that it does something to their brains or and alters their behavior so that normally an ant kind of hides away in the undergrowth crawling around, but once they're infected by the fungus, something happens to them and they're like, yes, must climb up and towards the light. And then once they've got to like the top of a stick or a blade of grass, they'll grab on with their jaws. And then again, the same sort of process will happen as with the moths. The fungus will basically consume their whole body, shoot up a little spike from the back of their heads or the back of their bodies, and then spray the spores over the other ants around, and carry on for the next generation.
When it shoots the spore, that sorry, the fruiting body of the fungus that we I don't know how to describe it like that. It's almost like a globe on a stalk, isn't it? It's like a ball, like a
Mm-hmm.
is the ant dead at that point, or is it
Yeah,
close to
yeah.
dead?
By that stage, basically the fungus needs to build that from some sort of material, and all of that
Yeah.
basically comes from the ant. So it'll break down the tissues of the body and use that to build that little spike that comes out the top. So the ant's long dead by then.
And the zombie, sorry, the fungus consumes the ant.
Yeah,
Do,
it's got sort of enzymes that break down the body and sort of turn it into sort of fungal tissue.
Lovely. You've got to admire these fungus, these fungus. It is incredible. It's kind of fascinating and scary and a bit creepy at the
Mm.
same time. And you've got this mix of emotions, but it is just deeply fascinating. Do they use insects because they're cold-blooded and fungus tends to like cooler temperatures to survive? Is that one of the reasons insects are used instead of mammals? Or how can you explain how it
I mean
works?
that's possibly one of the reasons as well. I mean, also their sort of bodies are quite similar. They contain like the ants' exoskeletons made out of chitin, and that's the same material that that fungi use to make their cell walls. So that it's quite easy for them to digest. I mean, there are fungi that do affect mammals. So the various ringworm and things like that
Yeah.
that you can get, but it tends not to. It tends to be a little bit more difficult. So yeah, mammals do have the defense of, sort of raising the body temperature and kind of fighting the fungus off that way. So it's a little less likely to be a parasite in that way.
Because cordyceps, it does seem to have specifically, it does seem to be targeted against insects. Is that right? And in terms of its parasitic preferences?
Yeah, and there are a few interesting cases. So, for example, there is a type of cordyceps that affects cicadas, and they burrow under the ground. And some of the species have hopped over from cicadas to truffles that also live underground because they just happen to live kind of right close to each other. They've sort of swapped over and started to parasitize another fungus rather than an insect. So yeah, you can sometimes see these they're called the truffle clubs, and these little like drumstick things that come out of the soil. And yeah, rather than being on an insect, there's a little like globular fungus underground that they live off of.
And most of the cordyceps lives in Asia, like Southeast Asia countries, warm tropical climates.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the case with a lot of different species. Yeah, as you go further south into the rainforests and things, you just get way more diversity. Yeah, there's like for every sort of one species in Europe, there's hundreds, if not thousands, in the rainforests. And the classical Chinese one is from sort of Tibet, so that's more like the higher altitude areas. But yeah, I think we basically get like one common species in Britain, that's called the caterpillar club fungus, which is Cordyceps militaris. So it's a little orangey red thing that comes up above the soil. But yeah, but if you go to other countries, you get much greater diversity.
So there is actually a cordyceps in the UK, native to the UK.
Yeah, I've only found it a couple of times. It's quite difficult to spot, particularly if it's hidden by blades of grass and things like that. But yeah, I have seen it a few times, and yeah, it's amazing thing to spot.
Going back to how the fungus controls the mind of the host, do we still not understand how that works? Do we know how it works, or are we just taking guesses how we think it works?
I think I'm not sure it's been worked out for the ants, but there's been research on the cicadas, and they found that they release kind of sort of hallucinogenic type chemicals, and also like almost like sort of amphetamine like chemicals as well. So they sort of these affect the behavior of the insects just by chemical means as well. And there's also fungi that affect flies. You'll find these in Britain as well. You'll sometimes see that the flies hanging from a leaf or something like that, and they've got these kind of white spores all over their body, and they actually release chemicals that are a bit like the pheromones of the flies. So that attracts like male flies to try and mate with these female flies, and then spread the spores onto them. So yeah, it's pretty grim.
There's something about a parasite that's just creepy, and the way they get into your body, and the various means that they just live off you. It's just so unwholesome, but at the same time, kind of fascinating and
definitely, yeah,
intriguing.
Yeah, you're trying to imagine how all these things evolved, and yeah, the complexity of like, how did this happen? It's really extraordinary when you think about it.
It is, and I think that's what fascinates me, and that's what drew me to. I didn't know of cordyceps. I knew of parasitic fungus first, and I knew about how it controls insects, and it makes them do things against their nature. So they climb these leaves, they do the death grip, and then they like you say, they fruit and release the spores, and the cycle begins again. It's incredible, and I know it happens with the carpenter ants. I think that's one of the ants that are particularly affected by it. Um, how long does the life cycle of the fungus, particularly cordyceps, last?
So normally it would be like an annual one, an annual cycle. So the moths that they feed on, they would because they're quite high altitude, they'd overwinter underground, then sort of pupate underground, and then hatch in the spring. And the caterpillars would eat the grass and get infected by the spores, and then
And not all, sorry, not all. I mean, most of the hosts die, I assume, in most cases, but there are other examples where the fungus coexists with the host.
Yeah, I mean there are plenty of sort of beneficial fungi. So in a lot of, for example, beetles, a lot of the wood-boring beetles, they actually have they use the fungi to degrade the wood because they can't digest the wood themselves. They don't have the right enzymes in their guts, so they'll basically like infect a tree with the fungi, let the fungi eat the wood, then they'll eat the fungi, and because of that, they'll even so that the females when they go to a new tree, they'll have like a special kind of pocket on their body, sometimes on their head, where they'll like put some fungus, and that'll be their little inoculum of fungus. And then when they go to the tree, they'll release it into the wood, and it'll eat the wood for them.
So essentially, they're using the fungus as a tool to degrade
Yeah.
the food stuff, so it's ready to digest.
Mm.
That's really clever. That's kind of like turning the tables on the fungus, isn't it? It's not eating them; they're using it for food.
Mm.
Just go.
And even some of the ants. So there's the leaf cutter ants as well, and they'll have these amazing sort of fungus gardens inside their nests that they collect leaves, chop them up, and grind them up, feed them to the fungus, and then they'll eat the fungus.
It is a complex relationship, isn't it? Because fungus does so many good things. I mean, we have fungus inside us, doing various things in our body. Digestion is one of them. And like you say, insects use fungus to turn the things they collect into food to feed themselves, to feed the larvae. It is fair to say that it's also very useful, isn't it? Fungus. It is essential for life in lots of ways.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just in terms of the ability to say break down wood. Without that, we'd just be knee deep in in dead trees, and because wood is such a tough and complex molecule that it's really difficult to break down. So fungi are really the only thing that kind of break it down on any large scale. So if you look at like the whole kind of functioning of ecosystems and things like that, they're really a key part of that.
And fungus has been around for millions of years. I mean, probably since there was life on the planet, it's always been there, hasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the earliest kind of dates are back when everything was sort of single-celled organisms in the oceans before really any complex life. There were fungi around. So if you look back, sort of they're related. They're quite closely related to us. So sort of if you look at the tree of life, kind of fungi are the next kind of branch along from the animals. If you look back in time, so that's why there are these sort of say the chemical similarities between insects and fungi, and also it's one of the reasons why fungi is such a good food for us, because they're a bit more digestible than plants. They're not quite as kind of tough and they've got all the cellulose and things that plants have, so they're a bit more like us, and so they're kind of part of the way towards being like a meat.
I read that about how mushrooms are almost like flesh. The kind of structure, that the texture of them is very similar to chicken. Everyone always says everything's like chicken, but I know you get chicken of the woods, which is a type of mushroom they find in the UK. So I've heard that. What drew you to fungus? What's the appeal to you?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? So that yeah, I mean, the first thing I remember was just looking through kind of books on with paintings of fungi in them. So you know, like your sort of nature guides and things like that. And I remember seeing like this drawing of an Earth star, and like it's got this kind of globe in the middle, and then these amazing rays that kind of open out, and yeah, they drew this little like puff of spores coming out of the middle. And it's like, wow, that's a crazy thing. I couldn't wrap my head around it. It was such a sort of unusual looking object. It was like, I want to find one of these. And I didn't until many years later, but it's like that kind of sparked something as well. And yeah, and then just looking through other books and yeah, seeing all these amazing different colors and shapes and things like that. It's like, wow, these are cool. I want to find out what they are and kind of yeah, find out more about them.
Maybe this is a stupid question. Do you get fungus on the seafloor, like deep in the ocean? Have they ever found anything on the seabed, like really far
Yeah.
down?
So there are lots of like yeah fungi in the sea, but they tend to be yeah not very visible. They don't really form the same kind of fruiting bodies as fungi do on land. So they would sort of infect like algae and seaweeds and things like that. Some of them are kind of symbionts of seaweeds as well, so they kind of live inside them. And yeah, an awful lot, yeah, just again break down organic matter. So fish and things that die and fall to the seafloor, the fungi sort of play a role in kind of breaking those down as well.
They're vital to the ecosystems, aren't they? Without
Oh,
fungus, we
definitely.
just wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be here.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Lucas, that's brilliant. I appreciate it. I know we've only touched upon a few of the topics of fungus, but it is such a complicated field, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, they're discovering so much more now. I mean, particularly say with, you know, the advances in DNA sequencing, they're sort of working out like, yeah, how the different fungi are related to each other, which had been very difficult before because, yeah, basically a lot of fungi look very similar to each other. So yeah, without the DNA, it can be very difficult to kind of work out how they're related to each other and yeah, and just working out the kind of intricacies of the things like the way that they you know the fungi attract those fly infecting fungi attract the flies to them and things like that. So yeah, it's really a kind of golden age of discovery of like new species and kind of information about fungi at the moment.
Thank you, Lucas. It's been fascinating talking to you. Take care.
Right. All right. Cheers.
Bye bye.